Hello and welcome to Media Watch on Hunger and Poverty. I'm your host, Bill Schickler, and today we'd like to continue with a program interviewing an icon of the labor movement, both here in D.C. and nationally. We're very honored to be able to have with us today Jos Williams. Jos, welcome
Bill,
to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to really hanging out with you here for a little while.
Jos was for 35 years, 34 years, head of the D.C. Labor Council, which is basically the largest and most prestigious labor organization in Washington, D.C. And for people who didn't see our previous program, we're talking about labor unions, and in particular, the largest coalition of labor unions, 10 million members strong, the AFL-CIO. And Jos, maybe you would like to just briefly tell our viewers just what the letters in AFL-CIO stand for.
Yes, it stands for the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organization. And it's a merger of two separate federations that had their genesis back in the early and part of the 20th century. The American Federation of Labor, which was the first one, was a union of craft union, was a federation of craft unions. The Congress of Industrial Organization, started by John L. Lewis of the Mine Workers.
United Mine Workers.
The United Mine Workers was a coalition of industrial organizations, as the name implies.
As a matter of fact, their headquarters used to be right across the street from our station here.
Oh, is that right?
That's right.
See, I'm learning something about the history of my own organization. And they pioneered the United Auto Workers, the steel workers, and many other industrial unions that now are standard unions.
They got generated in the mid-40s?
In the mid-40s. So started by John L. Lewis. And then you had Walter Reuther, who became head of that organization. You had, on the other side, you had George Meany, head of the AFL-CIO. In the mid-1950s, I think it was 55, 56, or maybe 57, there was a merger of the CIO, which is the Congress of Industrial Organization, and the AFL, which is the American Federation of Labor. They merged into one organization called the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organization, with George Meany as its first president.
And presently there are 56 unions?
56 national and international unions. Now, let me make sure that everybody understands what the term international union means. International means those unions that have members in both Canada and the United States.
Like the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
Yes, and at one time, the UAW represented both Canada and the United States. You now have two separate unions. But most of the Office and Professional International Union is called OPEIU, which is the Office and Professional International Union. The Teamsters, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, means that they have members in Canada.
Okay. For our youth that are watching this program, the labor union movement has been fighting for the rights of all of us, the 99%. We talk about the 1% running things. Well, starting, I guess, just in the middle of the Vietnam War and post-Vietnam War, there's been a relentless attack on people overall, since unions have been responsible for most of the gains that your average American citizen has. A minimum wage was won through the struggles of the union movement. The ending of child labor, that wasn't done out of the goodness of hearts of these employers that employed children. It was because unions got together and demanded legislators to stop doing this. The 40-hour work week, that was a result of American workers getting together in these unions and collectively demanding that we have a 40-hour work week and paid overtime. And the minimum wage laws that were passed. That wasn't just given out of the goodness of the hearts of employers. They just didn't come together and say, oh, let's give people a minimum wage. No. That had to be fought for by an organized movement of workers that were represented through the union movement.
That is correct. And one of the things that one might say, the description that you have just given, is a definition of what this movement is all about, which is it's a movement that is designed to bring economic justice and social equity into the lives of our community, where our members work, live with their families.
Everybody.
Everywhere. And it does not make a difference if you have a union card or you don't have a union card. What the movement is about is fighting to ensure that workers across the United States and now across the globe are people who have some dignity, who make decent wages that can keep up with the cost of living, basically being driven up by capital.
Okay, there's three areas that I would like to discuss with you that I think are, one is two of them are historical reasons why we've had such a struggle here in the last 40 to 50 years. One of them is a phenomenon that used to happen just in America by sending industries down into the South. This happened in the steel industry. Steel companies there was a lot of union activity in what we now call the Rust Belt, even Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. These areas became unionized and had very good conditions and working terms for their membership. So these companies, they said, well, we're going to go where there aren't any unions, and we can pay everybody less. We don't have to pay them good benefits. We don't have to work them anything about pensions. We don't have to do anything about their health insurance. So they would move to places like Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham became a second Pittsburgh because they moved a lot of steel producing facilities down there because there was no union activity there. Part of the same process that denied African Americans their rights in the South were the same people who had said, hey, these workers are very similar to these African Americans. They're demanding stuff. We're not going to let that happen here. You bring your stuff down here. You don't have to worry about unions. We got our KKK characters. We'll take care of any of these union activities. So internationally, the same phenomena, these guys said, well, if we can go to Birmingham and pay these guys less, maybe we can go to Brazil or Mexico, and instead of paying people a middle-class income like $15, $20, $25 an hour, we'll pay them $5 an hour. No benefits, no pensions, no nothing. So an international, starting, I would say, in the early 70s, a movement of manufacturing went to what we call spiraling down to the lowest common denominator. Even now, you're sending stuff to Bangladesh, manufacturing, Vietnam, our so-called enemy in the past, China, Brazil, and all these manufacturing jobs that were made up the basis of the middle class have, just like the phenomenon of sending production, manufacturing down to south where there weren't unions. They said, well, if we can get it done cheaper there, why don't we go overseas and really get next to slave labor? I would say that's been number one, has been the biggest negative phenomenon in our country in the last 50 years. Would you agree?
I would agree. But it started not No, not didn't start in Mexico or even Taiwan or Singapore. You're right. It started by manufacturers moving to what is called a cheaper labor area. They went from New England, where you had high-paying jobs, and they did not want to pay their workers who were living very, very well.
Buffalo.
They went from northern New York, from New York City, from Maine, from Massachusetts, and they went down into Mississippi. They went down into places where you had workers who were being paid sub-minimum wage. And they were paid sub-minimum wage. The very same people who were enemies of blacks in the South were the people who resisted unionization down there. And people blame politicians down there. Yes, the politicians are to blame, but the blame really belongs to the employers who use their capital to buy politicians and try to subvert living standards. The union's reaction was to follow them. Wherever they went, Bill, the unions decided that we were going to follow them and organize, because it was the only way that we could raise the standards of living of the people north is by going down and fighting for the jobs down south. Said the employer, as you so eloquently said it, it's getting too expensive for labor in the United States. So let's head south to Mexico. And the automobile industry, which was one of the heaviest unionized industries, started going down south into what is called the Maquiladora area, which is that area we are right on the border, where you could provide cheap labor, build the cars, ship them across the border, and then sell them. Not at the cheaper price, same price, but with a higher profit.
Now, I understand that even now, that the people who live in maquiladoras, they're suffering and they're trying to get out of there. And they haven't benefited from it at all.
They're seeking to organize themselves. And the people who are now in the maquiladora, those companies are now seeking to move from there and move to places like China, Singapore, Bangladesh. Wherever there is cheap labor, that is where capital goes.
Okay, now we've seen that these trade deals, so-called trade deals, NAFTA, they had a similar thing like NAFTA with Korea, with Colombia. Then they had, right now, this thing called TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which actually isn't really a trade deal because most of our manufacturing has already gone to China and these other places. I would say it's more...
Well, the TPP now excludes China.
Right, yeah. But I'm just saying as far as how the trade deal itself affects manufacturing. We still have a certain amount of manufacturing, but most of it is gone. So this TPP trade deal, it does affect manufacturing, but it's more about power. It's like if you have produce and it's poison, well, if you have laws in the U.S., no, you can't have those laws. We're going to have this trade deal that says, yeah, you have to take this poison stuff. Would you like to comment about TPP for a minute?
The trade deal does not just cover the manufacturing. In fact, most of it is on an agricultural basis. Copyright stuff. It's the ability to produce whatever it is that the American production, whether it's television, whether it's radio, all of these things, the cell phone that we use, which we take for granted, all of the things that we take for granted, if you look at it now, it doesn't say made in the USA. It all says made in China, made in Taiwan, made in Bangladesh, because these are the areas where you have labor that is cheapest. So what you have now is governments being literally bought by capital to make it easier for them to get things imported and across the border with cheap labor.
In 1905, a book was produced called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, but I'll just go on there. Real quickly, since we're running out of time, of the other two phenomena, people should realize we're on public access television, but most media, 99.9% of it, is corporate media. Do you own a television station yourself? I don't think so. You need multi-millionaires, even if it's publicly invested. So rich people run media, newspapers, radio, television, and slowly but surely they've been silencing any news about labor and labor negotiations, unless it's as huge as like the Verizon strike, almost 40,000 people. So people say, oh, we don't care about unions. They already did everything they need, and why don't we hear? Oh, it doesn't make any difference. The reason is just like Bernie Sanders being blacked out for so long. When you have a rich group of people, they are not going to, they're rich themselves. They don't want to cut their own wrists by pushing an agenda of a group of people who want to take money from them. Since they're already the richest 1%, they own the media. So if you're representing a union, you're trying to get some of their money. They're not going to cover your issues. So the media has been the second largest, I believe, issue to deal with. And it's a hard thing to do. We try to do it here on public access.
Let me ask a question, just as you have asked it of our listeners. Wherever you're seeing this program, ask yourself the question, how much coverage is there of working people's issue in the newspaper, radio, or on television, except probably on public access media? Because those who own the media, as you so rightfully have pointed out, control the medium of information. And why would you be covering workers' issues if it's not in your interest? Notwithstanding the protestation that somehow or the other people own the waveland. That's what people tell us, but you can see how much. Here I am with a full 23 minutes. I don't know of any commercial station in my 34-year history where I have been on for a solid 23 minutes on any commercial television station. Right. And that is a telling point with respect to who controls the medium of communication. So if you are looking at this program, you ought to be saying to yourself, your union, your organization, you ought to be demanding that whenever a television or a radio station licensing comes up, that is the time to be asking specific questions. FCC of precisely what is the role of the media in your locale. What are they doing to cover the issue of working, the struggles of working men and women?
I can remember in the 60s, Washington Post, every week, at least one time a week, would have a little section in the metro section on labor news.
That is not existent anymore. In fact, the workers at some of the big media stations, whenever and if they have a work issue, that's not covered.
Right.
The Washington Post in our area it silences the issues that they have between the Guild and the Washington Post. But they will cover the negative part of a trade union and a labor movement.
Okay, let me do something real quick here. We're getting ready to wrap up. I've been thinking about this since I was in college. Automation. President Obama has talked about the number of jobs lost to automation. You see these sick, greedy people like Google, Uber saying, well, we want to have driverless trucks. That could wipe. Driving vehicles is the #1 job in the United States by numbers. More men, at least, drive vehicles. I did it myself for 37 years. Drive vehicles for a living. And now they're talking about automating it. Is everybody going to become a systems analyst? I don't think so. So looking into the future, we have 2 minutes and 41 seconds. How can we deal with this automation? We don't have guns tied to our head saying, you got to automate.
I think that the issue of automation is going to be a challenging issue for the workers and unions in this country and in the world. I am not quite sure that short of going up and physically stopping,
Unplugging it.
it's going to stop. I am not quite sure that I have the answer as to how it is that we deal with this automation issue. All that I can say is that one of the things that the leaders in the trade union movement have got to do is to set up study on this particular issue and how we transform ourselves and deal with the question, do every one of these things create jobs somewhere down the line? I mean, you still are going to have people making those cars, though it may be less. But for every challenge that we have, does that mean that there are other jobs created elsewhere? I'm not quite sure that you and I have the answer to that. But it's something that I don't think we should sit back and just moan about it. Right. I think we have got to really look at it and see what is the workforce of the future going to be like. And that's what today's challenge of the trade union movement is. What is the workforce of the future going to be looking like, and how do we make sure that that workforce is adequately taken care of?
Yes, and I would just add that we do have free will. We're not forced to lay off 99% of the Earth's population for the sake of efficiency. I believe in free will, and I think we can solve this problem if we don't end up going into despair. Like I said, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play?
I enjoyed the play extremely well, as long as we took care of Booth.
Okay. Josh, thanks for being on the program.
My pleasure being here with you.
And we'll continue to deal with labor issues. And as you can see, there's many issues to be dealt with, but keep fighting.
These visits are so short with you, man.
Okay. Thanks. See you next time.
Power to the people.
Very good.
Take care.
See how fast that went?
Oh, man.
We just touched the surface, just like ice skating.